Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth or study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. The word mythology has done so much damage to our civilization, especially Hindu civilization, and the identity of millions of followers of Vedic culture, that it is almost become a laughable thing. That how come the word mythology can be used against just one community, one culture? Why so much? And and after studying all the commentaries and the reports and the continuous reports coming from American academia or European academia, I have come to one conclusion. So when sometimes what happens is the methodology which is used is, if I'm wrong, I'm going to prove you that you are wrong so that I'm look a little bit better or correct. And that's what it has happened, where they are trying to prove very hard that Ramayana and Mahabharata were just stories written to motivate the human mankind. I mean, almost like comparing it to Disney. But they themselves believe in Disney. Children grew up with Disney and imaginary folklores which have been stolen from many parts of the world. Greek folklores have been stolen into Romans. Roman folklores have been philosophies have been converted into Western philosophies. You won't believe that Socrates was a vegetarian. Very few people know about it. He believed in reincarnation. He believed in karma. And he created a theory of forms where everything has a form, roop, and form theory. And then his disciple, Plato, continued that, even though he disagreed some parts of it. And then his disciple Aristotle did that, continued it. And then his follower was Alexander. He did that. That's why he was in search of India to find out the source of his guru's information, Aristotle's information. Why was he so hell-bent on India? Because India was the cradle of that civilization. So even their philosophers claim it. And later on, when Christianism came, and after the Roman Empire, during the Roman Empire, they also absorbed everything the Greek philosophers, which they called mythology in the first place, because it came from the East. So it's a whole cycle. And I have a very special guest today, and who is going to take us to one aspect of history of the Gupta period, and which I am also very intrigued to see it. I have not seen the presentation, and I'll see it with him. So let us welcome Dr. Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Welcome, Dr. Raja.
Thank you, Aditi. Namaskar.
It's very interesting, right? Like if I am pointing fingers at you are worse than me, just to prove that I'm better than you. That's what is going on, like, isn't it?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
the effect is people investigate the accuser more than the accused. And across African Union, across South American countries now, South American countries have a big movement towards going back to their natives population. People don't know that 2013, Mexico officially announced there are 63 official languages. Spanish is just one of them. And 263 dialects legalized in Mexico. And I really commend Mexican government for doing that. It is one of the first countries in the world in South America to do that. Following Mexico, now Peru is doing it. Peru has 27 official languages. One of them is Spanish. These are not Spanish-speaking countries. They recognize that Spanish was imposed on them. Some people may not like it because but Happy New Year. What do you have to say to that, Radharamana?
Absolutely great, Aditi. Things are moving in the right direction. I think now that we are in the age of internet, people are getting to know what was there before their civilization, their culture was taken over. And people now want to connect to their ancient roots. And I think all over the world that is taking place.
The one thing I also say, the political, whatever happening in politics today, global politics or geopolitics, people call it, it's actually a step in the right direction, because somewhere people have to be recognized, like what happened in Canada. And I also can commend Canadian government, and viewers must know that he's from speaking from Canada. Canadian government has also done a good work in exposing what the atrocities on the native children. They were involved in that, so that is a good thing, right? Isn't it?
Ab- Absolutely horrifying what has happened here, and similar to what has happened in India also. Only that Indian people, a lot of people don't know about it, but the people have started to find out.
Find
I
out.
mean, the devastation that has happened in India. Like, I think recently another study has come that estimates like more than 100 million people were killed in India during the British Raj. Like, nobody knows. Of course, before that, we came to know that $45 trillion, I think, was taken out of India. So just think of it. I mean, uh, the life expectancy of the people had dropped down to what, 20s in that time.
That's right.
So we had a very, very horrific past during the British Raj. And the thing is, the people who took over, they tried to glorify that period.
The amazing thing is that I mean, if I just say the wealth of India, you mentioned $43 trillion, $45 trillion. The 60,000 tons of gold was shipped to Spain. 60,000 tons of gold was shipped to Spain. 6,000 ships, each carrying 10 tons, has been recorded. It's a recorded one only from Aztecs, which is Mexico City area. That area is a huge area, but the area. I'm not even counting Peru, not even counting Ecuador, counting Guatemala, counting any of the Costa Rica, any of these, the tail countries, which is in the small connection between the two continents. Colombia, I'm not saying, I'm not even going to Portuguese, and not even touching Argentina. Argentina is a big landmass, but just going on the west coast, right down to Chile, I mean, only records available is the Peru records available and Mexico City records available. But where does all the wealth go? So most of it came to USA, and some of it went to Europe, back to Europe. So
Still, nothing lasts forever, Aditi. We can see right in our period, like what, couple of 100 years, and look where those countries are now. I mean, the Spain is poor now.
Spain is poorer than Mexico. People don't know that. It's poorer than Mexico. And also the only thing that left is the dance and songs, which are just there. And even today, people think it's ended. You won't believe like what's happening in France. See, the karma never leaves anyone, never leaves. It affects nations also. And you can see World War I happened, World War II happened. Even today, there are French colonies in Africa. The French colonies in the south of Indian Ocean, British island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, is not ended. And there are a whole lot of occupied lands, like the Maoris were occupied in New Zealand, and Aborigines of Australia. Like these are all oppressed people. And nobody has heard them yet. Nobody's heard them yet. I mean, India has always been the protector of human rights of the natives. And I will commend Indian government as well as to actually Indian government to actually preserve the culture of the natives, even though either others may say whatever they want, but the India has preserved all the languages, India has preserved all their cultures, India has a department to take care of it. Other countries don't even have a department. In USA, there's only one state, which is California, which has apologized to Native Americans. And because of the 21 missions who devastated Native children for many reasons. I won't be this show, we can't talk about all those things too much. So what do you today talk about Gupta? I'm very eager to see that.
Absolutely. Very fascinating subject, Aditi.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay, so I'll start by sharing the screen.
Yeah.
Can you see it now, Aditi?
Yeah, very clearly I see that. Yes.
So wonderful. So thank you, Aditi, again for inviting me. And it's my pleasure to talk to the viewers about my research. So this is the ninth part in the series that we have been talking about, that we started, I think, in January this year, on an alternative timeline of Indian history. And today I'm going to talk about when did the imperial Gupta era begin. And this will be part one of the two-part talk. So for the background, we had done 6 parts from 1 to 6, part 1 to part 6 this year. And we went into the details about how the Indian history has been constructed. And we found out that it has been constructed by going backward and forward from the two seat anchors of Indian history. And the first one is the identification of Sandro-Cottas with Chandragupta Maurya. And second one is the identification of Devanam Priyadarshi of major rock edicts with Ashok Maurya. And with this, the Indian history has been synchronized with the Greek history, and our historical timeline has been constructed. But there are many problems with this timeline, and I have shown that we can create an alternative timeline based upon alternate seat anchors. So basically, these two, in my view, are not sacrosanct, these seat anchors. The Sandro-Cottas of the Greek records can be Chandragupta I as well, of who founded the imperial Gupta dynasty. And then I have given arguments that Devanam Priyadarshi of major rock edicts can be identified with great grandson of Chandragupta I, Kumargupta I. And then after that, we talked about reconstruction of Indian history, and we began with the invasion of India by Alexander. So now what we are going to do is that we are going to talk about an alternative timeline that begins with Alexander's invasion. And for the next 1,000 years, we'll see what is the timeline that our historians have developed, starting from British historians to now, what they think is the Indian history, and whether there is an alternative timeline that fits the evidence that we have, if this timeline fits better. So what we have is in the existing textbooks, we have got Chandragupta Maurya and the Mauryan dynasty as the contemporary of Alexander and his successors like Seleucus. And so in this alternative timeline, we have imperial Guptas as the contemporary of Alexander and the Greeks, his successors. So to find out, to develop an exact timeline, we need to know when exactly did the imperial Gupta era begin. And I call it the 0 point of imperial Gupta era. So we have got several sets of evidence. Let's say we have got the evidence of Al-Biruni. And what he says here, we know that the beginning of imperial Gupta era has been fixed based upon the testimony of Al-Biruni. And he says that as regards the Guptkal, people say that the Guptas were wicked, powerful people, and that when they ceased to exist, this date was used as the epoch of an era. So what he's saying is that the beginning of imperial Gupta era is actually the end of the imperial Gupta dynasty. But we have it other way right now as the beginning. And you can see that during the initial research by the British historians, they had taken this statement by Al-Biruni exactly, and this you can see the proof of this on the Samudragupta pillar. It is known as Asoka's pillar, but I have shown earlier. Also, we talked about it that it's actually Samudragupta's pillar. It's not Asoka's pillar. It's actually Samudragupta's grandson, uh, Kumar Gupta I, who had written on this pillar, and it was first written by Samudragupta. We'll come to that again also in the later talks. So if you, on the base of this, we have got this plaque by the British, and you can see that here, you see that it's quite different from the history that we get taught, because it was based upon the Al-Biruni's statement. And he said that this monolith was first erected by King Asoka around circa 250, BC 250. And then it continues. The purpose of inscribing the edict regarding the propagation of Buddhism, it was next made use by Samudragupta about the 2nd century. See that here it says that the Samudragupta, the time of Samudragupta was 2nd century. So basically, this was in line with trying to have the imperial Guptas complete their reign. They get taken over by other dynasties by the time the imperial Gupta era started, which was 319 BC. So that's how they put him in the 2nd century. But later on, they changed the story, and that's how we have got now Samudragupta later, I think, in the 4th or 5th century CE. So what we have is that this imperial Gupta emperors have been fixed by using a 0 point of imperial Gupta dynasty in 319 CE. And that's based upon this statement by Al-Biruni. And now I have added to the previous statement, and it's highlighted because he says that because the epoch of the era of the Gupta falls like that of the Vallabh era, 241 years later than the Sakka. So he says that the imperial Gupta era began 241 years later after the Sakka era. And if you count from 78 CE, which is the 0 point of Salivahan Sakka era, we get the 319 CE for the 0 point of imperial Gupta era. Now, where does the imperial Gupta era start in our alternative timeline? So for that, we go to the evidence presented by Sri Kota Venkatachalam. He has written many fascinating books on Indian history. I have a very high regard for him. And he had fixed the Sakka era in 550 BC. And he has also connected it with the beginning of the reign of Cyrus the Great in Persia. And according to him, it was the Cyrus the Great that Varamihir had referred to, and his Sakka era is based upon Cyrus the Great. So this is a fascinating stuff. And again, I'm going to talk about Varamihir and Cyrus the Great later in our presentation, one of the forthcoming presentations. So let's call this era the Cyrus Sakka era. So we have basically two Sakka eras, Cyrus Sakka era and Salivahan Sakka era. So how did Sri Kota Venkatachalam come to this 550 BC? Again, we'll discuss this later. For now, we'll just assume that he has shown that it's 550 BC. And then we can count from there. And here is a relevant quote from Sri Kota Venkatachalam. And he says that, of course, you don't have to agree with everything here. Even Western scholars agreed that either Vikram era or Salivahan era was not prevalent at the time of Garg. So the Sakka era related in the sloka is neither Vikram nor Salivahan era. And this fact is approved by all the historians. That was his take. It may not be approved by all historians, but this is important. And he says that is the age of the Persian emperor Cyrus, which began in 550 BC. So if we count the Sakka era from 550 BC, this is the era that is not taught in our textbooks. And we count 241 years from that, then we get 309 BCE for the 0 point of imperial Gupta era. Now we come to another piece of evidence, and I think this one is a really fascinating evidence. And this is the evidence of Sumatitantra. So Sumatitantra is an astronomical text, and it's the first astronomical text from Nepal, first book on astronomy from Nepal. Now, I came to know about this book from a research paper when I was searching, and it's written by Mr. Kamal P. Mall, and its title is Mandev Sambat, an investigation into a historical fraud. So you see that the title itself it aroused so much curiosity in me, because when you say that something is a fraud, then what was the basis for it? And many times it happens that it's just because it does not match the accepted historical timeline. The evidence is just claimed that it was a fraud, and they just discard it. So that's any piece of evidence that is claimed as a fraud is of very special interest to me, because it could be hiding some very important information that will help us in establishing the actual timeline of Indian history. And so this title itself, it's a symptomatic of the attitude that modern historians have towards our ancient records. So basically, when we have a piece of information, our aim should be to try to understand it fully. What are its implications? We should not just declare it forgery because it does not suit our purpose. So here is some screenshots from the paper. You can see this was in the contributions to Nepalese Studies, volume 32, number 1, 2005 paper, big paper, 49 pages. And what is of interest to me in that paper is this text. And it says the above text has been transcribed, translated, and interpreted differently by different Nepali and foreign historians of Nepal. Depending upon how, for instance, one translates the word Sampravartite. Yet the fact remains that not a single of the figures for the 6 epoch eras mentioned in the Sumatitantra, and that what is mentioned in the Sumatitantra is this: Yudhishthir 2000, Nand 800, Chandragupta 132, Sudrak 247, Sak 498, and Mandev 304 matches with the known historical facts. So what we have is that this important astronomy book is talking about 6 epochs, 6 eras. And the author and most of the researchers have not been able to figure out what it means. And this is what is given in the Sumatitantra. It says that historical facts and Sumatitantra's figures, and the British Museum copy of the Sumatitantra. So obviously, we know that British were taking stuff from everywhere and putting them in their museum, also destroying the beauty of many of the artifacts that they took from different places. So in this text, a very important text, and this is the original text that is there. So this for everyone to see. And it tells you, Jato Duryodhano Raja Kali Sandhyam Pravartate, Yudhishthiro Maharajo Duryodhanas Tyopi. So we see that it talks about Yudhishthir and Duryodhan, and Ubho Rajao Sahasre Dve Varsantu Sampravartati. So both the kings are continuing for 2000 years. And then it says Nand Rajyam Sat Satastancha Chandragupta, excuse me, Chandragupta Asta Topare Rajya, excuse me, Rajang Karoti Tenapi Dvatrinsat Tikam Satam. So you can see that, and then it talks about Raja Sudrak, and then it continues. And we'll go to the, and talks about the 304 for Sri Mandev. And so basically, what we have in the text is this information. And it has got that Yudhishthir and Duryodhan were present at the junction of Kali. Both of them continued for 2000 years. Nand ruled for 800 years, Chandragupta for 132 years, Sudrak for 247 years, Shak king for 498 years, and Mandev for 304 years. So it has got specific numbers. But then the author Mal, he discusses it, and he says that it is not clear whether these figures refer to the duration of the rule of a king or of the dynasty or of the use of epoch year. If the duration of a king's reign was specified, then it is a case of pious fabrication. So he looks at those numbers, he does not understand it, and he declares that it's a pious fabrication. And then he also talks about many researchers who have tried to make sense of this, and he says that no one has succeeded, and the easiest way out is to deem the whole thing a fabrication. He also quotes a noted historian, Sri K.P. Jaiswal, and according to him, it says, it is clear that the author of the chronology took chief reigns as landmarks and not always eras. There was Yudhishthir era, Nand and Shak eras, but there was no Chandragupta era, there was no Sudrak era, there is no trace of an era of Mandev. So he accepts that some of them are eras and some of them, he says, there is no record. So even though it says that, so he said there is no Chandragupta era, there is no Sudrak era. So he said, and this is a very important piece of information. And we know that the King Sudrak, the author of Mrichkatigam, we don't know exactly when, but here we have an era, and here we can really use this text to find out the identity of King Sudrak. And I'll do that in one of the forthcoming talks again. And we see that here it talks about King Mandev, and the historians think there is no trace of it. So basically what has happened is the Nepalese history is also off by about 650 years, just like our history is. And that's why what is creating all this confusion in the Nepalese historians. So let's try to understand what it says. So it tells you that Yudhishthir and Duryodhan were present at the junction of Kali. Both of them continued for 2000 years. Nand ruled for 800 years, Chandragupta for 132 years, Sudrak for 247, Shak king for 498 years, and Mandev for 304 years. So, I mean, you can look at it, and obviously the first thing you know that it's not talking about the ruling period of any of the kings, because nobody rules for such long periods. And also it is not defining how long the individual eras lasted. Because if the Saka era was only for 498 years, it would be wrong because we still use the Saka era. So what is it? What do these numbers say? And these numbers are very simple. What they are basically saying, giving is the time period between these different eras that have been specified. So if someone writes in this way, it does not mean that these are the only eras. There could be many eras in between. You have to use this only for the eras that have been specified in the text by the author. And since they have specified these eras, then you only consider these eras, and those numbers tells you of what is the difference between these eras. So it gives you the 0 points of so many eras. Such a critical piece of information. So what does it tell us? So it tells us that the Nand era started 2000 years after Kali era. The Chandragupta era started 800 years after the Nand era. The Sudrak era started 132 years after the Chandragupta era. The Shak era started 247 years after the Sudrak era. And the Mandev era started 498 years after the Shak era. And the text itself that talks about it, the Sumatitantra, was written in the 304th year of the Mandev era. So now we can calculate the starting point of each of these eras. So, and we know that the Kali era started in 3102 BCE. If you count from that, then we get the Nand era starting in 1102 BCE. And then we get the Chandragupta era started in 302 BCE. The Sudrak era started in 170 BCE, just keep counting. And then the Sak era started in 78 CE. The Mandev era started in 576 CE, and the text Sumatitantra was written in 880 CE. So here you have to keep in mind that there was no 0 BCE or 0 CE. 1 CE followed 1 BCE. So if you take 247 years from 170 BCE, that will come to 78 CE. And we know that the Sak era started in 78 CE. So this kinds of tells you that the interpretation is correct. We have got starting from the Kali era, and we have got to the Sak era, and with this calculation. So this gives you a solid confirmation of how this has to be interpreted. Now, this is very fascinating that we have got a Chandragupta era of 302 BCE specified in the Sumatitantra. And also this Chandragupta era has to be Imperial Gupta era. It cannot be Chandragupta Maurya era. It cannot be the Maurya era. And that's the reason for that is that it has already specified that the Nand era started in 1102 BC. And since the Chandragupta Maurya, the Maurya has followed right after Nand, so they cannot be separated by 800 years. So this text is very, very important. It puts the Nand era and the Mauryas far behind from what is accepted in, let's say, 1102 BC and then little later for the Mauryas. And the most importantly, it gives us an era for this Imperial Gupta dynasty that it started in 302 BC. And it's important to understand that these Chandragupta, this Imperial Gupta dynasty, they were married into the Lichvi clan, and they had settled down in Nepal. So there was a connection there, and that with that connection, they were able to remember the beginning of Chandragupta era. I mean, that's why they will. It's important for them also because of this connection. So we have got really fascinating evidence, 2 sets of evidence. One is that the Imperial Gupta era started in 309 BC. And the other evidence that we saw from Sumatitantra is that it started in 302 BC. So we got the difference, a minor difference, let's say 7 years. But how do we pinpoint exactly which one it is? Did the Imperial Gupta era start in 309 BC or 302 BC? So I will discuss some other pieces of important evidence to work out which one we should choose. And that we are going to do in the next presentation. So I would like to thank Aditya Satsangiji for giving me this opportunity, and Dr. Mahendra Thakur and the Sattology team for organizing this talk. Thank you so much, Aditya ji. And if anyone wants to contact me, these are my contact details.
Thank you. And very short presentation, but good one. You put everything in perspective, and I was interesting. I'm glad that you put a correction on the 2000-year thing, that how they should read it. And you also gave a reference of Pandit Kota Venkatachalam books, which has been people do not know that Pandit Kota Venkatachalam was a Shankaracharya from Sringeri Mutt.
Wow, wonderful! Thanks, Ajit.
The Shankaracharya, and so he has written a lot of books. And many of the books have dwelled into this aspect which you just mentioned. Like he's almost 40 books are available, but he wrote more than 90. So
great scholar. I have great respect for him.
Yeah, his grandson comes on our show many times. You could see his videos.
What's his name?
Yanamandra ji comes here. Shastri.
Oh, okay. I'll look at it.
His grandson has come on many shows here, so he has presented all his teaching. He's coming next week as well. So one question I have for you is, who was the last king of the Gupta dynasty? If you did
see, Aditi, that part again, it becomes very fascinating because I don't think people know where the Gupta dynasty ended. So I mean, we know only of the very prominent ones. But towards the end, I mean, there are fascinating books by Sri Ram Goyal. I mean, he then established historian part. But the thing about his books is that he talks about lots of evidence. I mean, you need to know what are the evidence to try to figure it out. And the Gupta era, towards the end of it, it is so complicated. I mean, people make all kind of assumptions. You don't even know about that. I mean, they are called also later Guptas, right? There are so many. There's a big confusion with the where the imperial Gupta dynasty ended, where the later Gupta just started. So that part is quite confusing. But we'll talk about the major. I mean, we are beginning with that. First we have to see where the 0 point is from where we count, and based upon that, then we'll go through that. I mean. We have Chandragupta. Before that, we have the beginning of the imperial Gupta Empire, and then after Chandragupta, we have got Samudragupta, then we have got Chandragupta, then we have got Kumargupta, then we have got his sons. Again, complicated after him. There is a Skandgupta, and then it continues. We have got Budgupta. So, I mean, the lines also change after Skandgupta. So, very fascinating. Try to figure it out, put it in a new timeline.
Yeah, people generally mispronounce Gupta. There's no Gupta. Gupta, Vishnu Gupta, Chandra Gupta. But because
Absolutely.
of English language, Gupta, just like you make Krishna as Krishna.
And
Krishna is
we
Rabbi's name.
change the meaning totally.
Totally change it.
And same
Like
with same with Shiva,
yeah, Shiva, Shiva.
and
And
we make it into Parvati ji.
and not yoga. No, 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 yoga. It's yoga. Ga is ga and ga has a lot of difference. In Sanskrit, ga makes completely feminine. Yoga. Uh, Krishna, like people just say like that. Oh no, Rama. I said no, no, Rama. No, it can be Ram, and but anyway, I don't go on the linguistics much because there are many people in the world can't pronounce the word R also, so they pronounce la, and I respect them, all of them, because you get the language from where you're born. So Europeans have the language from where they were born, and European Americans also follow that. By the way, European Canadians also follow that. So
Right.
and they add a in everything, a in the end. So don't make fun of those language things because these are the tongues that you get it from wherever you get. Now, one last question. In Bhagavad Puran alludes to Viswas Purji as the last Gupta.
Mhm.
Vishwas Purji. And I do not know who is Vishwas Purji. And I will
Yes.
be honest, I don't know who is Vishwas Purji. And he says said to be the last Gupta. And I do not know who is that. But anyway, in your presentation or research, do let us know. So thank you, Dr. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, for coming on the show. And thank you for all the viewers for watching. Do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback so that we can improve the programs. And do watch our new show on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays due to popular demand, but hardly anyone was there. I did the first show yesterday. So do join that. And that is meant for Western audience. So it is a very inconvenient time for the Indians, for other parts of the world. But that's what we're doing at 4 p.m., which is my time, 4 p.m., 7 p.m. Pacific. Please do join that show. And namaste and thank you.
Thank you, Aditi, and best wishes to all our viewers for this new year. Thank you so much.